So, we finally have the first 3 episodes of The Wheel of Time Season 2, and I've got to say, I kind of liked it. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of issues I have with these first 3 episodes, but overall, as an overall piece of entertainment, I'm enjoying what I'm seeing. As an adaptation, I have issues. As episodes of television, I have issues. But so far, it's a pretty significant improvement over Season 1. Because Season 1, I think, is incredibly boring. It ranges from pretty generic, to pretty boring, to pretty bad, with some good bits sprinkled throughout. But when it comes to the first 3 episodes of Season 2, so far, whilst there are times where it does drag, and yes, there are things that are quite silly in the writing, for the most part, there are scenes that are quite good, quite solid, and quite decent. So the way this video is going to be structured is that I have a bunch of notes in front of me. As I was watching the episodes, I made notes. So we're just going to go episode by episode and talk through all my notes. The Dark Friends social at the beginning of the episode was a bit weird, seeing as how the Dark Friends weren't being very social. It's kind of funny actually, because in my new review for The Wheel of Time Season 1, in my hour-long breakdown, I mentioned that the clip for Season 2, because this was the clip they showed us the sneak peek for Season 2, was actually decent. But the issue is that in seeing it in context, there was no extra context to the scene. When I called the scene decent at the time, I thought, oh yeah, it's an out of context clip, there's going to be more to the scene and such. But no, really, what you see in that clip is what you get. Which is kind of annoying because the scene doesn't really have a context. The Dark Friends are chatting, and then one of their daughters runs into the room, and then Ashamael starts talking to her, and then shows it to the Trollocs and goes, oh see, I'm not all that evil, and the Trollocs aren't all that bad either. The thing is, I like the actor that plays Ashamael. I think his monologue is good, but overall, the scene doesn't really add much context or extra detail to the plot of the Dark One. In the prologue to The Great Hunt, when the Dark Friends are meeting and talking, they talk about the Emmonsfield Fire, specifically Rand and Perrin and Mat, because they know that they are Ta'veren, but also they know that something about them is different and they might potentially be the Dragon Reborn. In the show, they mention that Rand is the Dragon Reborn, and then that's kind of it, because the little girl just runs in and then Ashamael starts talking to her, and it's kind of like, okay, but what's this got to do with the Dark One's plot or the threat of the Dark One? Also, where is the opening title sequence from Season 1? Like, that's one of the best parts of Season 1, and it's not in Season 2 at all, and that is so confusing. Why is it not there? Can Amazon not afford to pay Lorne Bow for the residuals for the score, or can the show just not afford to have the opening title sequence anymore? I'm so confused. When it comes to Moiraine in this episode, for the most part, all she does is just spend the entire episode being sad. That's kind of it. And the main issue I have with Moiraine throughout the first 3 episodes is that for the most part, she's really mean for no reason. Now, granted, there are times where she is nicer to certain characters. Take, for example, the scene where she talks to Bael'Daman. I mean, one, that's a nice, cool character from the books, and it's nice to see him in the show. But also, I like the playful nature of the scene in terms of, you know, Bael is talking to Moiraine and is trying to one-up her, but then she one-upped him by stealing the trinket and such and being like, oh, I know what this was and blah, blah, blah. That was cool. But also, when Bael mentions the fact that he's being followed by 2 Fades, Moiraine immediately warns him, gives him advice, tells him to go offshore, stay in the shallows, and make sure that he's not on land because the Fades are after him. She gives him money. That's all nice stuff. It's kind of funny because when you think about it, why didn't Moiraine do this to the ferryman in Season 1?
But my son!
That being said though, throughout most of the episode, Moiraine really doesn't do anything. It's just her and Lan being sad and mad at each other. And that's kind of it. Sure, Moiraine goes off and then gets attacked by a Fade, and then Lan defends her from the Fade, but then also, I don't like how Lan didn't put much of a fight up against the Fade, seeing as how in the books, Lan would be able to fight off Fades a little bit more than he did in the show. He kind of gets like sliced once or twice, and that's kind of it. He's done, he's out for the count, and it's like, Lan would put up a little bit more of a fight. And speaking of Lan, they really didn't do anything to redeem his character from Season 1. The character in the show is way too emotional compared to his book counterpart. And it's such an issue in the show because the character is supposed to be this big stoic warrior, but for the most part, he spends half the time like sort of holding back tears and being really emotional, and it makes him look really unstable. That isn't Lan. The scene with Lan that puzzled me the most was the scene where he's training by himself, he's just swinging his sword around, and he looks like he's on the verge of tears, and I'm like, what is going on? What is up with him? Also, the argument he has with Moiraine, again, the way he reacts and the way he acts, that's not Lan. Book Lan would have walked up to Moraine's face, looked her dead in the eye with a stern face, and said, don't shut me out, Moiraine. He would have growled it. In the show, he's all like, don't shut me out, Moiraine. The thing is, it's not Daniel Henney's fault. Daniel Henney was fine for the beginning of Season 1, but ever since, the way they've characterized Lan, that's not the character from the book. And taking the books out of the equation, just looking at the character in the show, He's just so emotionally unstable and whiny, and I don't like him. Also, Moraine is just so mean to him for no reason, and I don't get it. She's very short with him. She acts like he's her servant, which, I mean, he technically is, but he also isn't. The Aes Sedai and their warder are sort of like partners. And the thing is, the further on we get into the first 3 episodes, the worse their relationship becomes. Now, Perrin's arc in the first episode is fine, but I just do think it's weird how Perrin is the only one out of the boys that is going after the Horn of Valir. I also do think the show and the writing is failing to portray the grand event-like nature for the Hunt of the Horn. Like in the books, this is supposed to be akin to going after the Holy Grail, and in the show it's like, yep, going after the Horn of Valir, just because. I also do think the year-long time jump is just weird. Like, they've just rushed straight into the story. Perrin is now on the hunt for the Horn, and it's a bit weird. If you wanted to portray the Great Hunt, you need to really establish, hey, we, the people of Shinar, are going after the Horn of Valir that was stolen for us. You'd have a scene where Perrin is in Shinar and they announce the hunt for the Horn and all. Nah, they just jump straight into it, and it feels very jarring. And speaking of Shinar, I do like the casting for Ingtar. I think he does a good job, and I also like the fact that they foreshadow a lot of Shinar and Dark Friends in the Dark Friends social at the beginning, which I think is kind of cool. I do think looking back in the Dark Friends social, it's a bit of a mixed bag, because whilst the scene doesn't really have a context, it does do a good job of foreshadowing certain characters and certain events that are to come in the future, if the show pays it off. But also, I like the acting in the scene. Again, like I said before, the Ishamael actor does a very good job in that scene. Also, replacing Hurin the Sniffer with Elias, I think is a perfectly fine change. When it comes to adaptation, that's a sort of change I don't mind. Shrinking down the cast of characters from the book, specifically if they're as large as the book cast from the Wheel of Time books, I don't mind combining characters and shrinking them down, because at the end of the day, it's fine. Just so long as there isn't anything super significant that's changed to the story, to the characters, I don't mind this kind of change. Also, there's a scene of Perrin mourning his wife and coming to terms with her death. What? Where was this in season 1? I do think it's a good scene, and I also quite like Marcus Rutherford as Perrin this season as well. In season 1, he's a bit all over the place, and he's also not given that much to do in season 1. I have seen a bunch of reviewers complaining about Perrin, saying how he's kind of boring and how he's not like how he is in the book, but I don't see it. For the most part, in this season anyways, Perrin is acting very much like his book counterpart. When I see reviewers say, Perrin is boring and not very interesting, I kind of go, yeah, that was early Perrin. Perrin doesn't become a badass until book 4, or book 3 a bit, but Perrin doesn't become like Perrin Barra the badass until book 4. This episode, and it seems that this season, is just going to ignore a lot of the dumb writing decisions made in season 1. Like, they don't address the fact that Loial got stabbed by the Shadar Logoth dagger. They don't address the fact that Egwene brought Nynaeve back from the dead. They don't mention all the dumb, silly things that happened at the end of season 1, which, honestly, I'm fine with. If you're a non-book reader and you care about the continuity of the show, then yeah, it will be very weird and jarring. But for me, I honestly don't mind that they're brushing over those dumb mistakes, because honestly, they were so dumb that why did they do those things? The stuff done in the White Tower I think is done fine for the most part, though I do have a nitpick with this season, that is mainly with the casting of a lot of the Aes Sedai in this season. Moraine, Liandrin, Verin, and Alana I think are fine, because they've cast actresses that are good looking in their middle years. They have a youthful look to them. But when it comes to the other Aes Sedai, it does just seem like they cast a bunch of ladies in their middle years, or even just a little bit older, and they don't look like Aes Sedai. The one that sticks out to me the most is Shiriam. Now, I'm not trying to be ageist or insult these actors, not at all. I think they do a fine job. I just think that from an aesthetic point of view, seeing as how in the books the Aes Sedai are described to have an ageless beauty, these actors just don't portray that characteristic. Also, the scene between Alana and Egwene was kind of weird, when Alana's were like, indulge in your simple basic pleasures because you need to, feed into your quick impulses because that's the way to be happy, and I don't really agree with that messaging. Granted, the Green Archer are presented to be very passionate and very lustful, but at the end of the day, Egwene doesn't raise a counterpoint to that, so again, it does just feel like the writers just pushing in their own agenda into the story. Because not to be a stoic and go on monk mode on you, but instant gratification isn't always the best thing. Now, the stuff between Nynaeve and Liandrin, I think, is done pretty well. Though, I do think that the scene where Liandrin makes Nynaeve channel because she's angry, I think that in the books is done between Nynaeve and Siwan. But I like the scene because it establishes the fact that Nynaeve has a weird channeling block. She doesn't like surrendering to Sidar, and so she can only channel when she's angry. Also, I really like Zoe Robbins as Nynaeve. I think she really gets to shine in these first 3 episodes, and I think she portrays Nynaeve very well. There are times in season 1 where she's obnoxiously arrogant, and that's not entirely Nynaeve, but I've always thought Zoe Robbins portrayed the character very well. Also, the scene where Nynaeve is sparring with the warders. Why? What was the point? Nynaeve in the books doesn't like weapons, she doesn't like violence, so Why is she sparring with the Warders? I also really like the scene where Egwene and Nynaeve read Perrin's letter. The overall atmosphere in the scene is really well done, and I think it does a good job of portraying the Emmonsfield Five as a familial unit. I think the scene itself does a lot of good to help undo the poor characterization of the Emmonsfield Five in season 1. Now, Matt in this episode doesn't really get anything to do. He's just being psychologically tortured by Leandrin, and that's kind of it. Also, it seems like for some weird reason the writers are having his whole arc revolve around the dagger this season, which is kind of weird seeing as how he's in the White Tower, and in the books, when Matt goes to the White Tower possessed by the dagger, they heal him completely from the dagger. So I don't understand why in the show they didn't just do that. Because in book 3, they completely just heal him, and that's what I thought they were going to do, but they didn't do that. Now the dagger's like calling to him, but he doesn't want to take the dagger. It's a bit weird. And even though he wasn't in the episode much, for what he was given, I liked Donal Flynn in this episode as Matt. That being said, in the next couple of episodes, I do think Donal Flynn improves significantly as Matt. I really liked a lot of the new cast in this episode. The actress they got to play Elaine, I think is perfect. I think she's so lovely, and in many ways I think she's making me like the character more in the show than I do in the book. Because for the most part, I'm on book 8 right now, and aside from her introduction in books 1, 2, 3, Elaine, I don't really love all that much. I think she's kind of boring, but I think the actress they've got to play Elaine is really elevating her material, because I think she's so lovely. Though there are times where I did find the writing for her dialogue to be a bit too modern and too colloquial. There's a whole line where she's like, oh, you know, because of the whole daughter-heir thing, and I'm like, that's very modern. It's a bit weird. And episode 2 was the episode that really won me over on Donal Flynn as Matt. I think he is spot on as the character. He's just so much more playful and cheeky than Barney Harris ever was in the role. Barney Harris's Matt, to me, just felt like a victim. Now, I'm not throwing shade at Barney Harris. A lot of that was down to the direction and the writing for the character. But even still, when I'm comparing the two actors, I just think Donal Flynn is a much better fit to play Matt Cawthon. I honestly love the bit where Leandrin is leaving the cell and then he mimics out the movement of the bolt closing and then her footsteps walking away. That was just so Matt Cawthon to me. I loved that. This episode also turned me around on the actress that played Min, because in season 1, I didn't like her. I thought she felt way too mature, and she was so serious that she didn't feel like her book counterpart. But in season 2, she's much better, she's much more fun, she's much more quippy, she's much more snarky, and she feels more like Min. I do think she is a tiny bit too old for the character, but not by much. I did make the mistake in my hour-long season 1 review saying that Min was younger than Matt and Rand, but that's not the case. She is actually meant to be a bit older than Matt and Rand, but because she is so quippy and snarky, she feels roughly their age or a bit younger. Bear in mind, it had been a while since I had read The Eye of the World, and obviously when they introduced Min, they go, oh yeah, Min's a bit older than Rand. I forgot about that, because in the books when she shows up, she's just so quippy and playful and fun, and they don't remind us the fact that Min is older than them, so I just kind of assumed she was their age. Now, I've seen people complain about the stuff between Nynaeve and Leandrin not being book accurate and kind of like why they're humanizing Leandrin. I don't mind, because I think those scenes are really good. I really liked the scene where Nynaeve walked in on Leandrin trying to heal her son, because she says my beautiful boy, so it's not her husband or anything. But I thought that scene was really well done. I thought the actors did a great job, and I thought the acting and the emotion there was there. It felt tangible. A question I do have for all this White Tower stuff is, where is Sawan? I know she's in the season. She shows up in the trailer, so where is Sawan in all the White Tower Aes Sedai stuff? Like in the books, she is present for a bunch of these scenes in the White Tower, so in the show, why isn't she? I'm guessing that has to do with the fact that they couldn't afford the actress for multiple episodes or something. Now, getting onto the stuff with Rand, because Rand wasn't in the first episode all that much. I think he was only in it for like one shot, but just man, is Yosha Stradowski really good casting for Rand. I really like him a lot. Even though everything he does in season 2 so far is pretty much just made up fanfiction. Maybe just because I'm just a massive Rand fanboy and I'll happily watch anything that Rand the character does. But I enjoyed what he was doing for the most part, even though in episode 3, some of the stuff they set up in episode 2 isn't completely satisfying. I like the actress that plays Selene, though granted, I do have a massive issue with Rand and Selene sleeping together, seeing as how, if you've read the books, you know why that can't be possible. Like, the whole concept of Selene and Rand being an actual couple and in a relationship is just weird and goes completely against the book lore. And one thing I do wish they did with Selene is that I wish they lit her more like Cate Blanchett as Galadriel in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because Selene in the books is described to be the most beautiful woman ever. And the actress they got to play Selene is very beautiful, but I do wish they just did something with the lighting to really make her feel ethereal and out of this world. Again, do the glowing halation effect they did on Cate Blanchett, the sort of angelic halo effect to make her feel more otherworldly. Now, Rand working in the mental sanatorium hospital, I think was interesting. Look, it's fan fiction nonsense and it's not in the books, but I can't lie and say I didn't find it an interesting concept. But also, I think I just like the irony of the situation, the fact that Rand is slowly going mad and he's working in a sanatorium. I think that's kind of cool. I also like the scenes between Rand and Errol, because Errol was this old sword master, and it was nice that he was dropping book references with the sword techniques. Like, I think there's one called, like, cutting the cloth or slicing the wind or something. Those were cool. I was like, oh, Also, my ears couldn't help but perk up at the mention of Mazrim Taim. I was like, okay, they're setting up stuff. Okay, let's see where this goes. And speaking of setting up stuff and seeing where it goes, the stuff between Rand and Logain, when I saw it, I was so excited. I was like, okay, I have no idea where this is going. This is not book material, but this is fascinating. I can't wait to see where this goes. And I won't lie, they did fumble and they did drop the ball, because where it eventually ends up, it's whatever. It's okay. I think I was mainly just disappointed in the execution, but we'll talk about that more in episode 3. The stuff with Perrin in this episode I liked, though I have seen people complain about his wolf vision thing, which, to be honest, I do think for the most part people are misrepresenting, because in the show, Perrin's wolf abilities, it seems like he can just like look at the past and see things happening. But from what I'm just understanding, I think that's just meant to be a visual representation of him accumulating all the senses and painting a picture in his own mind. I don't think Perrin can actually see the past. I think that's just the audience misconstruing what is actually happening on screen. But the battle at the end of the episode I thought was cool. I thought it was nice seeing Perrin and Loyal fight together. Also, Loyal fighting was just cool, like him taking like 3-on-1 or 4-on-1. That was really cool. Again, it just proves that Loyal is the GOAT. But I'm not gonna lie, the ending to this episode and the ending to episode 3, I have no idea where all this stuff with Perrin is going, because they're doing some of the Great Hunt stuff, but they're also not doing some of the Great Hunt stuff, and it's interesting. That being said, I was not a fan at all of the Lan and Moraine arc this episode. It just gave me massive divorced couple vibes. I'm just not vibing with their interactions this season. I don't like it. Moraine telling Lan that Ran is alive and that she lied to him, even though she technically did, but she technically didn't. But the show doesn't go, oh, I just bent the truth. I didn't like the way that was phrased, but also her just sending him off to the White Tower and her saying that they were never equals, just, it rubbed me the wrong way. Moraine is never this rude to Lan in the books. Yes, they had disagreements, but she was never downright mean to him. Honestly, it's kind of just come out of nowhere, and it feels so rushed and weird too. Like, Moraine's like, you abandoned me, you were too busy off with Nynaeve, you didn't help me when I needed you, and it's like, but you masked the bond, you didn't tell him. It's just a bit weird. Episode 3, I think, is probably the best episode out of the first 3 episodes. It mainly revolves around Nynaeve and her trial in the Arches, and I think for the most part, the show adapts it quite well. The stuff with Rand in this episode was also okay. Now, granted, I think I enjoyed it a bit more than others, just purely for the fact that it's Rand, and they did references to the book, and I was like, Rand's arc in this episode is sort of an adaptation of the heist stuff from book 2, but in the show, it's not to steal the Horn of Valor and also find a Waygate. It's just so Rand can go and steal a bottle of wine for Logain, and it's kind of like, okay. It's a bit weird. I also did like the fact that they referenced the fireworks from book 2, mainly because even if they aren't doing a one-to-one adaptation of book 2, it's nice to at least see a reference to the things like the fireworks. This scene, in comparison to season 1, seems to be demonstrating more of a love and a respect for the books compared to season 1. Season 1, there was like barely any references or niche references to the books. In season 2, there's at least references like the stuff with the fireworks, like Rand's red dragon coat, which I couldn't help but fanboy out when I saw that. I was like, what? Like, come on. They did Rand's, like, dragon coat. Is it dragon or is it a heron in the show? But either way, they did Rand's red coat, and I couldn't help but just be appreciative of that. Season 1 has, like, a couple of moments like that when they go, oh, blood and ashes. But it's so infrequent and so rare in season 1 that it does honestly just seem like the people that made season 1 didn't like the books at all. Where in season 2, you can at least tell that they liked the books. Even if they're not following the plots one-to-one, you can at least see that at least there is some respect for the books in this season. Now, I mentioned it when talking about episode 2, but the stuff between Rand and Logain, I'm not gonna lie, I did think was kind of underwhelming. The setup for it was super compelling, and then the actual execution of the arc was kind of just, It was really anticlimactic. Rand goes to Logain. He asks Logain to teach him how to control the One Power. Logain's like, oh, get me some Gildan wine. And then Rand gets him the wine. And then Logain's just like, you can't control it. It's gonna consume you. I'm insane. And then Rand's just like, oh, you are insane. And he just leaves. And it's kind of like, is that it? The show made it seem like it was gonna be so much more impactful, so much more bigger, so much more grander. And the overall execution of it was pretty weak. Now, Matt's subplot in this episode I think is okay. He does get belittled by Leandrin being called worthless and useless, but I do hope that this is just set up for all the awesome things Matt is supposed to do at the end of book 2 and book 3. I'm choosing to believe that this is set up and not the writers just dumping on the character again like they did in season 1, but who knows? The thing is, I'd like to believe that this is set up for Matt to do the cool badass thing he does at the end of book 2 and to do the cool badass thing that he does at the end of book 3, but I don't know. I don't know with these writers. The writers have set up the ending to book 2 in the show. Like, they do mention things like, oh, there's going to be a grand battle in the sky and such, and yeah, that's book 2 stuff, so here's hoping they follow through, they do the Rand stuff, and they also do the Matt stuff. Now, I've also seen a lot of talk of people saying that Matt seeing Egwene and not going to her is very out of character, and I do agree with that to an extent. If this was the books, yes, Matt 100% would have run towards Nynaeve. He would have been like, I'm so sorry. He would have hugged her, especially considering the fact that both think that Nynaeve is dead. But the thing is, I can see why the writers didn't have Matt reunite with Egwene purely for the fact of dramatic purpose. Again, if they have Matt do a combination of the awesome things he does at the end of book 3 and at the end of book 2, then I think that, in my eyes anyways, it would have redeemed the character. Minor spoiler here, but if they do adapt the ending to book 3 where Matt goes off to rescue Egwene, Elaine, and Nynaeve, then I think in many ways that will redeem Matt's character, because obviously if Matt's showing a hesitancy to go and find Egwene right now and reunite with her, it makes more sense that he will go off and rescue the 3 of them and then he'll reunite with them then. Because if that's the case, that scene could potentially be emotionally powerful. The talk Perrin has with the Shamael is fine, like it's nothing groundbreaking, but I do admire that there is at least an attempt to adapt Perrin's man versus monster arc from the book. Now, the show also kills off Uno, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not as upset as some book fans are, because from what I remember, Uno's only in the Great Hunt. Apparently the character does come back in the later books, from what I have mildly researched. So them to kill him off I think is a bit strange, but also I'm not as upset as some of the fans are. Maybe I will be once I finish the entire series and I see what Uno does in later books. Maybe I will be as enraged, but when it happened, it didn't really affect me all that much. It was shocking, but I wasn't like,
oh my god, they killed Uno, hate these writers.
It wasn't like that for me. And overall, I do think episode 3 and the first 3 episodes as a whole was solid. Yes, there were slow bits. Yes, there were bits with bad writing, and I'm not a fan of Moraine's arc this season at all. But overall, it is a big improvement over season 1. And looking at the sneak peek as well, if they pull off what I think they're trying to pull off, this could be a very entertaining piece of television. Is it a fantastic adaptation? Not entirely, but compared to season 1, it's much better. I'm liking the characters more this season. I still don't know how the story is going to line up, but if they pull it off, I think it will be a very entertaining piece of television. I've seen reviewers compare the show. I think it was Jake and Nadia from Man Carrying Thing who said this, but they said that The Wheel of Time feels like a CW show. I do think it does feel like a CW show at times, but also I think it feels like the Percy Jackson film adaptations. Season 1 is a worse version of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, because I actually enjoy Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. The film isn't really accurate to the books, but it tells like an overall-ish kind of story where it resembles it to a point. But for the most part, that first film is fan fiction. And then you get to Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters, and it's kind of like that film is trying to course correct to make it feel more like the books, but then also that film kind of wanders off in its own fanfiction direction, and that film isn't as good as The Lightning Thief, but even still, I admire that for trying to be more book accurate than the first film was. Like, The Lightning Thief is a better film, and Sea of Monsters is a better representation of the source material, kind of. And that's what I think the Wheel of Time show is right now. Granted, looking at the sneak peek for the upcoming episodes, it does look quite good. It does quite look epic and big and bombastic. There are battles, there are wars. It seems like Rand is finally going to rise to the figure of being the Dragon Reborn, and he's going to be like known to the people at large. It seems like the big climax in Pharma is going to be entertaining and action-packed, and I hope it is, because so far I am liking season 2 so far. It's nothing amazing. It's not fantastic television or anything. This is no Game of Thrones or House of the Dragons or Daredevil or whatever. But I like it. In a binary world of thumbs up or thumbs down, I'm giving season 2 episodes 1 to 3 so far a thumbs up. Could it be better? Yes. Am I enjoying it though? Yeah, I am. Will it hold up on rewatch? I don't know. We have to wait for the rest of the season to come out. For all we know, all the promises they set up at the beginning of the season just falls flat because they butcher everything at the ending. So it's kind of a thing where we just have to wait and see. But those are just my thoughts on the first 3 episodes of The Wheel of Time Season 2. What did you guys think of them? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Did you like them? Did you think they were just okay? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media, all that good stuff. And until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.